Nearly 17,000 Floridians filed for unemployment benefits for the first time last week, but the amount they're eligible for is the subject of much debate. In an exclusive interview with Jim DeFede from our CBS station in Miami, Governor Ron DeSantis acknowledged significant flaws in the state's unemployment application process.
Do you believe that the system was in part put together the way it was to discourage people from being able to collect unemployment?
I think that was the animating philosophy. I mean, having studied how it was internally constructed, I think the goal was, for whoever designed it, was let's put as many kind of pointless roadblocks along the way so people just say, oh, the hell with it, I'm not going to do that.
The system DeSantis is criticizing was put in place by former Governor and now Senator Rick Scott. Senator Scott had this to say about his successor's criticism on Wednesday.
It's tough to be, in politics. Some people, they take responsibility. Some people just blame others. This is a tough time to be a governor. There's no unemployment system in the country that's set up for this unprecedented number.
For more, let's bring in Jim DeFede. He's an investigative reporter for our CBS station in Miami, WFOR. Hi, Jim. So good to talk to you again on Red and Blue. This is really fascinating. Let's talk about this system. The system to apply for unemployment is relatively new. Who is responsible, Jim, for what people are dealing with right now?
So you're right, Elaine. This system is only about 6 or 7 years old. So you saw a lot of the employment systems around the country were creaky, but those were 30, 40, 50-year-old systems. This was a new system. The state of Florida spent $77 million to construct this system. The leading consultant was Deloitte. They received around $50 million. And yet you see in Florida that as people were losing their jobs, they could not apply. We were hearing story after story after story in the early days of the pandemic about people trying to get on and log on and not being able to even submit an application for unemployment. And this was critical for two reasons. You mentioned at the top that Florida's unemployment system is one of the worst in the country. Well, not just the mechanics of it. Florida only gives a benefit of at maximum $275 a week and limits it to just 12 weeks. So that benefit was at risk, but more importantly, nobody could get the $600 weekly checks from the federal government unless they went through the state unemployment system. So you had people who were literally starving, waiting to try to get some money, and for months the system failed them. And now we learn from Governor DeSantis that was intentional, that they just constructed this system during the Scott administration to keep claims low, to discourage, frustrate people so they would just walk away from the system and not be able to get the benefits they were entitled to.
You know, it's clear, Jim, from those sound bites we played earlier, there really doesn't seem to be any love lost between these two. What's that about?
So they have, that is the worst kept secret in Florida, is that Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott have no love for each other. Rick Scott had supported another candidate for governor. These two men have also been talked about for the last 2 years as potential presidential candidates in 2024. So the fact that they may vie against each other has added to it. There's been small petty gripes. Rick Scott, for instance, left Ron DeSantis's inauguration early to go hold his own party. There's a lot there between the two men, and their staffs never got along. And Rick Scott, from the beginning of the pandemic, has been blaming Ron DeSantis for not messaging properly the virus and not really taking leadership of it. So they've been sniping for a long time, and you can expect it to continue.
All right, well, let's talk about the pandemic. In July, after Governor DeSantis ordered businesses there to reopen, Dr. Anthony Fauci from the White House Coronavirus Task Force said he thought Florida opened too early. Well, now the state has one of the highest rates of infection in the country. What is Governor DeSantis doing to respond?
So let's go back to why that was the case. Why did our system fail us when we reopened? It comes down to two issues: testing and contact tracing. The testing system, Florida, to its credit, does a lot of testing. The problem is nobody can get their results in a timely manner. So as a result, you end up not getting a result for 6 days, 7 days, 10 days. At that point, it's ridiculous. You cannot do contact tracing. And the state's contact tracing system, even under the best of circumstances, was horribly set up, does not do the types of things that it needed to do in terms of caring for people, following up with people. So with those two legs of the stool gone, of course, Florida was going to fail. Now, the governor has tried to sort of ramp up testing in certain areas. He's now introducing instant testing where you get the results within 15 minutes in certain areas, around nursing homes, also around for those folks who are symptomatic. So he is trying to, and we are seeing some of the numbers come down. But let's face it, the numbers are not adequate. I'll make one other point. I think what Florida did wrong, and a lot of states did wrong, but particularly Florida, we thought that flatten the curve meant success. And that's not what it was. What we ended up doing was, as long as we could fill hospital beds, we thought we were fine. As long as we had more hospital beds to put patients into, then we thought we could handle the system. And all what we really proved was we just became more efficient at distributing pain and suffering because we could process it faster. But that's not the recipe for success.
Well, Jim, is it clear how Governor DeSantis' relationship with President Trump impacted the response? He is a staunch ally of the president's.
So I asked him that question during our interview. I think the Washington Post recently suggested that he is tethered to the Trump administration. So when I asked him about that, he, of course, bristles and sort of says, no, he's charting his own course. But it's hard to distinguish anything that he is doing significantly different from what the president wants. Now, the governor also makes the point, however, that close relationship to the president has benefited the state of Florida. He tells a story that, for instance, when they ran out of remdesivir in the state of Florida, they were supposed to get it in 7 days, a new supply. He says he called the president and they were able to get it flown in 3 days. Now, whether or not that impacted other states, Ron DeSantis isn't saying, but it's those sort of relationships that he thinks in the long run benefit the state of Florida. But at the same time, the governor's biggest criticism is he has not issued a statewide mandate for masks. He refuses to. And one of the interesting things in our interview is that he does grudgingly say, yes, people should wear masks, but then almost immediately he talks about how the scientific literature is split on how effective masks are. So he undermines his own message at the same time. I know from talking to political leaders around the state that even other states like, California, more Republican states such as Ohio, Texas, those folks are just telling him, just pass the mask mandate. You don't have to send troops out to enforce it. Just put a mask mandate into effect and it sends a clear message. He refuses to do it. And as a result, he's willing to just stand by the criticism.
Are there signs at this point, Jim, how this pandemic is shaping the presidential contest there?
Well, it's certainly causing a problem for the president here. You got obviously a significantly older population in Florida. That is one of the most important demographic groups. Far more important than young voters are the older voters in the state of Florida. They are reliable voters. I do believe that this has chipped into the president's support since many of those older voters are now among those at risk from the pandemic. I think that, you're seeing in some of those suburban areas around the I-4 corridor, parts of Miami as well, where you're starting to see questions about whether or not the president's leadership on this issue was significant. Let's also talk about the economic impact. Florida is a tourist-based economy. It relies on tourism. There is very little tourism going on right now as a result of this pandemic, and a lot of people are thrown out of work. To what extent they blame both DeSantis and the president for that, we'll probably see in November.
All right, WFOR's Jim DeFede. Jim, I have a feeling we will be talking to you a lot more as Election Day approaches. Thanks as always.